We go to a lot of effort to do that. What's that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, almost all houses that are single floored have no bearing walls inside the house. That's why we do it, so you can remodel the thing. Okay, you can rip it out and fix it, or change it with a new occupant, or whatever the case might be.
Unless you do a rare roofing change.
Yeah, it will depend on what you're trying to carry on the roof, but in today's world with the CNC truss manufacturers that we have, that most times we can span huge distances and not do interior bearing. Now, if we got a 2-floor structure, we almost always have interior bearing because we're carrying a floor up above it. And our floors, once you get a span of 18 feet or so, we're about at the limit of what wood floor joists can carry and make an effective floor. Now, we can go steel and things like that to carry that weight, and that certainly does happen occasionally. Not all the time, but sometimes. And it depends on the structure. We're going to have bearing walls in our structure, and we'll cover that when we get to it. So I use that. Plumbing walls are another wall that I shade, and I'll put it in a legend to make sure people know, because a plumbing wall's got to be a 2x6 wall. And it's kind of, you want to point this out because if a framer's looking at it, it's hard to tell the difference between a 4.5 inch and 6 inch at a 1/4 inch to a foot scale, where you're reducing it 48 times. And so you want to do something to call those walls out. I put a note on them, I shade them, I do things like that so that they don't accidentally build it at a 2x4, and then we got to rip the thing out and put it back in. You'll also see shaded walls or pony walls behind washers and dryers, where a lot of times the plumbing that goes behind there can fit in a 2x4 wall or even a 3x6 wall. But a lot of times we like a little more distance back there just to help with the venting for the dryer and stuff, and we might build 2 walls back to back to just give us, 10 inches in there to work instead of standard stuff. So, and that's all things that go on the building. So don't be afraid to use wall shading. Again, if you do it, save it for the end until you know that your interior partitions are defined by space, because that hatching just requires another level of editing, and there's really no reason to do it until you're ready to plot the thing. I did pop open a drawing that has this type of stuff, and I want to just pop this open. So here's a wall that is in a structure. So here you can kind of see the floor plan. None of the walls are really shaded through this thing except for this main one that goes down through the center. This was actually a 3-story structure, and I had a wall that I had to really carry a lot of loads on, plus run plumbing and HVAC in. Now, we used to give chases for plumbing and HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning stuff. Now we run those through stud cavities for the most part, so we don't have to worry about chases that much. Just spaces where you move things up through, give space for that. We kind of got it figured out where we're moving through wall cavities now. But like this wall right here, I actually hatched it 2 different ways, because in this drawing, I used 2 sides of hatching. This, I don't know if you can read that, it's red. 2x6 plumbing and HVAC wall, insulated for sound. Now, I used in my legend, I used a dithered color that's solid, and that was a bearing wall. And then I used a cross-hatching one for plumbing walls. This one happened to be both. And so I called it out a couple different ways because I wanted to make sure that they knew this wall sitting in the inside of a house and it's not 2x4. And that's just kind of the big thing, is I wanted to make sure they built it with the correct materials. So keep in mind, look for those specialty type of walls, and a good way to call them out is using some hatching, whether it's solid or got cast iron hatching in it. We still use that all the time, stuff of that nature. Let's see. I don't think this floor, this is an upper floor here, I don't think this one really has any shading on it. No, it doesn't. That wall that you just looked at, by the way, lines up right with this one. And I thought about hatching this one too, because this was a wood wall, stem wall, it's underneath the floor. And typically those are 2x4, but again, we had to go 2x6 on this one because you can't have a bearing, well, we'll get into structure later. You can't start small and then put bearing on it that's bigger. You have to have full bearing for anything that's carrying weight. And we'll get into that when we get into cutting our sections and how we're going to support the structure. All right, so that's the big thing I wanted to point out on walls. Now, what we're going to go into today is we're going to look at doors and windows. Now, as a general rule when you're doing these, and again, let me make my doors and windows layer white here so you can see it. Now, certainly this is the way I do it, and I kind of do it the way most drafters in the Magic Valley do it, and up through the Wood River Valley, but it's all over the place. How do you represent doors and windows? What kind of symbol do you use on the drawing, and how do you give the size information for it? That's really what you need to look at and how you want to display. We're going to go through the text on it, and you're going to see a bunch of different symbols for a bunch of different types of doors. As a general rule, we do not use separate symbols. We use what's called a window schedule or a door schedule to differentiate between our stuff. Now, with that said, you do have some doors that are drastically different, and you might want to point those out. You have some windows that are drastically different from each other. You might want to point those out so they make sure they know where they're going. Now here I just kind of show some generic symbols. You've seen this before. So any swinging door, we use this symbol for. Now remember, we're cutting this section at 4 feet up. So we're coming and intersecting this door. So when I look at this, I see that the two seals, that's a wall frame. So I use object lines to describe that. Then when we come to the door, this is background information. The door is going to go where the door goes. Framers are going to put the opening for it, and then when we mount the door in it, we're not moving that frame unless we have to, but we're trying not to, right? So it doesn't matter if this is a glass door, it doesn't matter if it's a wood door, doesn't matter. Now for the width here, and then the width, this line right here represents the slab of the door. A lot of people use 2 lines here versus 1. That's what you're representing is that slab. It should be drawn true size. I'm not sure what door 13 is here. It's on the next here. I bet it's 2/8. So let me just run a quick distance on this. So if I measure from here to here, I've got 2'8". Now this should be 2'8" from right on the inside to that frame also. And if you look at doors, like just turn around and look at any of these doors, they will flush on one side of the wall. Okay, so you need to draw them true size. Okay, so this one's going to open to the inside, so it's going to flush right there. Okay, and it'll be inset a little bit when we do it. So therefore, any swinging door, I use this symbol. Now certainly you can use your own symbol if you wish. Just stay consistent through the drawing. Windows, pretty much just this symbol right here, where, now, I do break convention on windows. Because technically, if I look at these 2 sides, what does that really represent? It represents the wall, doesn't it? So if I'm cutting through this wall, what I'm seeing there is this wall that's sitting right here. So technically, it should be an object line, right? Because our walls are a major edge. Now, the reason I break that convention, and tell you what almost every drafter I know does, is we want toggleability on these. We want to be able to turn them all the way off, turn them back on. And if I had this with 2 layers, I wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, so I would leave everything on a doors and windows layer, and everything is printing at 0.012. Okay? So in essence, that's your major symbol. To give the size information, you can do it 2 ways. You can put it right here on the drawing itself. You give the location dimension. You can see these. Can you see those okay? These dimension lines right here coming off. We dimension them to the center. So that's where we're locating the window. Most of them have the same top, so they locate them up and down. As a general rule, it's 6'8" for the top of them. Now, what you don't have is the size of the window itself and the type. You can put it right here on the drawing, but you're going to have a ton of information if you do that. Now, the standard is that we would then put it where we always put width first. So if I put 2'6" by 3.0. That would size that window. Where I'm putting the width at 2'6" and I do the 2 as my 1/8 inch text, I use the superscript, thank goodness for that now, in M text, to put the inch. And then I've got a by, no spaces generally, and then this is 3 foot, 0 inches. And that would be the height of the window. Okay, width is always given first, height second. Becca, you got a question?
Yeah, do you always show the windows when they're closed? Do you know what I mean? Because some of them are like...
Yeah, I never really talked about that. I do.
You do.
I do. Now, this line right here, it's a single line. What do you think that line is to represent?
Single glass?
To represent the plated glass. Is that the way our windows really are?
No.
No, absolutely not. We cannot buy, first off, there's only one line. In Idaho, you cannot put in a single pane window. Can't do it, it's against code. It has to be double pane or better, because we cannot get the insulation factor. Now, that's in today's world. So you should have 2 lines. Now, in addition, where do the windows actually sit? Where does that plate of glass sit? I mean, look at those. Where's the seal of it? Where's the window? It's on the outside, right? They face up on the outside. So technically, it would sit over here. Remember, though, this is a symbol. All it's telling you is there's a window there. I can get the rest of that information off of my schedule. Yes?
So back to where you labeled the 2, if you didn't want to have, if you had very simple, you didn't want to have a window schedule and had a couple, are you saying that if you labeled it 0, which windows in dimension 1, that's on it like that, it's good?
I could put 2.6 by 3.0 and typical.
Typical, yes.
That's if every window in there
Right.
is
Then if you
that
had a
size.
Z window, then you could put that one for typical, so you only have to label like 1 or 2 on a drawing, if that's the case.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, if I'm doing a garage or a shed, a lot of times I'll go with this method. Because it's quick and easy, it's right on the drawing.
Did you do multi-liter? And then,
No, you just lay it right here where this
Just lay it
circle
underneath it.
0, just lay it right next to it.
okay.
Yes, Sandy?
Do you have to go to the center of the window? Or can you go to one edge of the window?
Depends on how your framing crew is gonna work if you have that. The architectural standard is you go to the center.
Because I hate going to the center.
That's-
You
yeah.
pull your tape out, and you have all your measurements, and you make your marks, and then you go to the center and you have to pull another tape out and do it.
Yes, you do.
And I hate that.
That's typically what we do. And now framers, they know where the center is. Then they have to get the size, 2.6. And so then they do the math and go, well, that's 1.3. Luckily, windows have been standardized and doors have been standardized. That's a fairly recent development. It's only about 12, 14 years old. It used to be, if you had Andersen windows, you had to know what their frames were versus whoever's. Now they're all the same. Okay? When you give a size, that's the measurement to the outside of the frame of the window now. Okay? All windows are done that way. Okay? So this is really not a 2.6 by 3.0 window, because it's probably got an inch frame around it, right? That holds the glass and allows it to move or something. Okay. Now, what they didn't do is they'd measure 1.3, and then the standard setback framers know, I'm gonna add another 1/4 inch to that, and that's gonna be the opening they're gonna build so that the window can fit in there. For doors, they leave an inch all the way around it. Top and the 2 sides. Okay, that's what most crews will do. Now, Andy, if you have access to a framing crew like Wolverton's, they have their own framing crew. They dimension specifically for that crew because they know who's building it, and they've had meetings with them, and they go to face the studs. They do those edges, just because it speeds up their framing crew. But they're not going out and hiring a subcontractor to build these. That's the advantage of having your own builders. Remember we talked about that team there? Is the builder in the team or not? For most of you, they will not be. Not in this market or the commercial market. But if you're lucky enough to get it, take advantage of it and do something like what you're just asked.
It's so
Yes,
much
sure.
easier.
What about the height placement of the window?
Their standard height is the top of the window always sits at 6'8". If it changes, you need to make sure they know that. And in fact, on this structure, it does change. I'll show you where I put that. So this is your horizontal representation on the drawing. Okay. Now, the size information. For the most part, on residential, you're going to have enough doors and windows. If you label in right on each individual one, this drawing is going to have boatloads of stuff on it. It's going to be hard to read. So it's very common to pull this information out and put it in a table. And we can do this for a lot of things. The two you almost always see pulled out are window information and door information. You can also pull out flooring information, painting information, all these types of things. And your text in chapter 16 goes through a lot of different schedules. We call them not tables, we call them schedules. Now what happens here is you put a symbol. Make sure you use a common symbol. Here I use circles for windows, squares for doors. I use hexagons for smoke detectors. Just you want to stay constant through these things. Now this is Windows 0. Now kind of, Lisa, you asked earlier, what if all the windows are the same? Well, here's Windows 0. There's Windows 0, there's Windows 0. These are all three the same window. Now what then the framers got to do is they will go and they will look for this thing. Okay, where here is a window schedule. Again, it's got a title, 1/4-inch text, 1/8-inch text throughout. I changed the color on this to white, but it's going to print on my text layer. Okay, this is printing on my text layer. So 0.016 line width. And you would come down here, and you would come down, oh, here's window O. You kind of come down here, and we find out that window O is 2 foot, where's O? Right here. 2 foot 6 inches wide, but it's a 6 foot high window. Okay. So notice there's an asterisk next to this one. Okay. There's a single hung window. You're going to find it, I put location also, so you're going to find it in the family room, the music room for this structure. But then that asterisk comes down, since this is a 6 foot window in a 9 foot wall, so window C, F, J, L, and O, my text isn't on here, it's going to have a top plate height of 7'8". Now the reason that is, if you get below 18 inches, you've got to have tempered glass within the floor. And if you take a 6'8", right, that's the top of most windows, subtract 6 feet of that, how far is the bottom of the window from the floor? It's 8 inches. If it's closer than 18 inches to the floor, the glass now has to go safety glass, right? Same stuff you got in your windshield, so when you get in a wreck, it breaks into those little tiny hexagons, won't cut you to pieces. So we bumped those windows up so that we did not have to go tempered. Now, not that it's a bad deal, you can't tell the difference between a tempered window and a standard window when you look at it.
Price-wise.
When you pay for it, you're going to pay an extra 30, 40 bucks a window or so, depending on the size of it. So it's not a huge cost either, but it is a cost.
So how, what was that height?
18 inches. We're actually going to look at window code today. Okay, so this is where you're going to get all the information. Now, this is also telling the type of window. Single hung. Okay, so therefore this is a vertical slider, and it's only going to move one way. You might have fixed plate. This is a window that doesn't open. This one's an awning window. Awning window hinges at the top and opens out. Usually you see them in bathrooms. You see them in a lot of basements in the old days.
Do you go awning or just casement? So
Casements are
just
different
goes
than
this
an
awning
awning.
has to go
Yeah,
up.
Yeah.
awning is a
You have an awning, I think you have a jalous, which is one that hinges at the bottom and opens, same as an awning, but the hinge is on the opposite side. You got a bunch. Garden windows are very common. That's one I use a different symbol on. We can look at a garden window in the text.
Do you buy those standard?
Yeah, you can buy them standard. All right, so this is how you're going to represent it on the drawing. Now, just real quickly, I do want to come back and say, you know, I don't use the same door symbol throughout. Okay. Now, here's a different type of door.
sliding.
This one's a slider. So all my sliding doors use this symbol. Now, a lot of times I do not even include the arrow. If I've got a closet door that's a sliding door, How many of you have sliding doors in your closet? Yeah, me too. I don't put those on there, arrows. Why? Because they both slide, right? They're both on tracks and you can go either way with them. Right? The sliding glass door you're getting out of, one frame moves typically. If both of them moved, I'd take the arrow off. So there's that one. That's a kind of a specialty door.
Wait.
What's that 3/ mean? Look at your site, what is that?
That means my text is, I don't have the artstyle.shx in here.
Oh.
And so it's defaulting back to simplex and it doesn't have, it's probably 3.5.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So for your sliding doors, so you always have to have that OBJ line, no matter what, that last OBJ
Yeah,
line?
you leave the outside.
Oh,
To
now,
define the
this is the
outside.
difference between an interior and exterior door.
Okay,
On an exterior door, we leave the outside line. That represents the seal of the door, because you look at any exterior door, it has a threshold, right?
yeah.
Okay. And that's what that outside line represents, and your text will point this out to you. Interior doors do not have a threshold, like this one right here. It looks like you do because we switch flooring types right underneath it, but it's constant on the floor underneath those. So when you're doing an exterior doors, you leave the outside line. Interior doors, you take them both out. Now, some people will take those exteriors, let me go to the front door on this guy. Some people will actually take this and offset it like 2 inches and build that threshold a little bit differently so that it really pops, where they do something like this. So as you're looking at that wall come through, you see the threshold, because the thresholds actually do come outside the door. Okay, next time you walk out your front door, look at it. I don't, because it's an extra step. And they get the idea just by leaving it straight. So exterior doors, leave that outside of the wall line. Okay, that represents the threshold. All interiors will not have that. You can look at this drawing very quickly. I mean, like through here. There is very little space in here. That's why we use those schedules. I mean, these things get tough to read because there is so much information on them. You want to use schedules. Get that information out of there so that you clean the drawing up. Remember, clear, concise, complete, that doesn't change. That doesn't change from day one in here till the last day you're here, no matter what you're doing. So we're trying to clear it up by pulling that information off.
Yeah, see, you put all your finishes in those, that's kind of, you've done that on a schedule too, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, sure could have.
So you don't have the dimension on there, like we're doing?
What's that?
You don't have to dimension the room size on, you know, underneath?
You'll
for
get
quick
there. No.
reference? And I know you're dimensioning, but you know, I didn't know.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to try and get into. So I've got people starting into the meetings, and in essence, all I'm expecting to see is a room space with a title and then the approximate size of the room. Once you get to a finished drawing type, you're not going to use that,
Okay.
okay? Because we've got dimensions. We don't need to tell them what the size is. What I do then switch is my standard is I'm trying to help the truss designer out here. Okay, so I give the flooring type second, and I give the ceiling type first. Okay, so I'm telling the truss designer this has a flat ceiling on here. Okay. Now, we'll cover that when we get back to it. So all those ones you're doing, you're labeling a game room or bedroom, and you're putting 12 by 9 or whatever, you're going to delete all of that size information off.
I don't want that you put 1 3/8 and did it, it would have to get exact for you?
No, go to the nearest inch or even the nearest foot at this point. When you folks are putting this together for your presentation, you do not, you can go to the nearest foot.
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine. We've got scale, right? We've got a drawing to scale. We can, if we need to get to the nearest inch, we can do that. There, you do not need to take the time to do it right now. Okay. Yes, Becky?
Are the doors and window schedules located on the same page as the drawing, like this drawing?
You want to try and get them close.
Okay.
Okay. It'll depend on how much room you have on your sheets.
If not, where would you locate them?
That would be
the
immediately
following
following
page?
them.
Okay.
If you look through a commercial set, typically they'll have a section that's denoted to all the schedules. And usually it's at the end. So they'll show all the stuff here, and they'll say reference window door schedule, or finish schedule, or knobs, because in commercial, we do push bars, we call them out, we call out hinges, we call out the color of them, do everything. So that takes sheets.
Uh-huh.
And there are sheets of no figures on them at all there are tables,
Tables, okay.
you know, giving this information out.
Could you have them like, say you're printing this like on a D sheet, can you print your window and door schedules on a regular A sheet size and then hand it to them as well, or would you want
That's
to?
probably not a good idea.
'Cause they'll lose it.
Because what's gonna happen to that, it's gonna get lost, right?
Yeah,
You want it in the drawing set so that they've got it and it's all stapled together. Can't get lost.
okay.
I try to always put them on one of the floor plans.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do on this one? This was a fairly big house. Let me go, here's my, oh, I've got it on my main floor, right here.
But then it's so much easier for your framer.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got, now this has both floors on it. So when they're doing, actually there's 3 floors on this one. When they're doing the 2 floors above this,
They have
they've
to-
got to come back here for those sizes when they're trying to build those openings into the walls.
Could you put them on each floor plan?
You
If
could,
you want.
you
It's
could.
space though.
You want to build
Client's
them?
gonna have to pay me for that. Okay, so you want to develop a standard and figure out what you're worth, right? And how you're gonna do that. Again, yeah, you can do everything. It all usually has a cost attached to it. Okay, now there is one other type of wall or door you are probably gonna want to have a unique symbol for, and I think this one's got a couple in here. Occasionally you do use a door like this one.